There was a time I got so good at pretending to be okay, even I started to believe it. I smiled at the right moments, laughed when I was supposed to, and said I'm fine, with a kind of ease that only comes from practice. But deep down, it wasn't peace I was carrying. It was exhaustion, the kind that comes from holding yourself together when you're falling apart inside. Maybe you know that feeling too, when you wake up and put on a version of yourself that looks calm, capable, unbothered. You play your part so well that even the people closest to you stop asking how you really are, because you've made it look easy. You've made survival look like strength. Psychologists call this emotional suppression, the act of hiding or minimizing emotions to appear stable. A study from the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, Gross and Levinson, 1997, found that suppressing emotions increases physiological stress, weakens connection with others, and even reduces genuine empathy. In other words, the more we hide what we feel, the less alive we become. We learned this early. Maybe no one came when we cried. Maybe honesty was punished, or vulnerability was met with silence. So we taught ourselves that being fine was safer than being real, that it was better to carry pain quietly than risk being misunderstood. But behind every practiced smile, there's a quiet truth waiting to be heard, a version of us that doesn't want to perform anymore. And maybe that's why you're here, to understand not just me, but us. Because pretending to be okay might protect us for a while, but it also keeps us from being free. If you think about it, none of us decided one morning to start hiding what we feel. It started quietly, back when we were small and still learning what love and safety meant. Maybe we cried and no one came, or maybe someone told us, "Be strong, don't make it a big deal." And in that moment, something shifted inside. We learned that being real could cost us connection. So we adapted, we smiled when we wanted to cry, we stayed quiet when we needed help. We learned that being good or strong meant being easy to handle, never too emotional, never too much. That's how the mask begot out of lies, but out of survival. Because a child doesn't want to lose love. A child will do anything to keep it, even if it means hiding the most honest parts of themselves. Psychologists call this emotional suppression, the habit of pushing down feelings to stay accepted. A 2003 study by Gross and John found that people who suppress emotions often appear calm but feel less connected and less alive inside. It's like living behind glass. You can see life happening, but you can't quite touch it. Every time we say, "I'm fine," when we're not, we reinforce that distance, teaching ourselves that peace is found in silence. As we grow, the mask grows with us. We wear it to look stable at work, to appear composed in relationships, even to convince ourselves in the mirror that we're okay. But inside, there's a quiet ache, a sense that something's missing, that somewhere along the way, we traded truth for acceptance. And sometimes that emptiness speaks louder than words, because the truth never really stays buried. It leaks through the tired smiles, the restless nights, the hollow laughter. And if you look closely, you'll see them, the small cracks in the mask, the subtle signs that reveal when someone, maybe even you or me, is pretending to be okay. You can't always see pain. Sometimes it hides behind perfect timing, polite smiles, and the right words. The people who pretend to be okay don't lie to you. They lie for you so you won't worry, so you'll think they're strong, so they can keep being the one who holds it all together. But if you look closer, there are small cracks in the calm. The mask always leaves traces. Here are 9 signs someone, maybe even you, might be pretending to be okay. 1. The smile that doesn't reach the eyes. It's the easiest disguise. The lips curve, the eyes narrow just enough, and the world believes you're happy. But behind that smile lives exhaustion, not the kind that sleep fixes, but the kind that comes from carrying invisible weight. Psychology calls a genuine smile a Duchenne smile, one that engages both the mouth and the eyes. But when the smile stops short of the eyes, it signals emotional strain. People who wear this kind of smile often do it to protect others from their pain. They believe that if they keep smiling, they won't make anyone uncomfortable. Yet every forced grin deepens the distance between how they look and how they feel. Over time, this gap becomes a kind of quiet isolation, where they begin to believe that no one could ever understand what's really behind the mask. 2. The "I'm fine" reflex. Ask them how they are and you'll get a polished, automatic "I'm fine." It's not that they're lying, it's that the truth feels too heavy to carry out loud. This reflex develops over years of being told not to make a fuss, not to overthink, not to cry. Saying "I'm fine" is safer than risking judgment or pity. Psychologists call this emotional avoidance, suppressing emotions to prevent discomfort or rejection. It often starts in childhood, when honesty about pain was met with dismissal or silence. Over time, it becomes muscle memory. They say they're fine so often that they start to believe it themselves. But deep down, they ache for someone who can see past the words and ask again softly, patiently, "Are you really?" 3. The overly reliable one. They're the people everyone depends on, the one who remembers birthdays, shows up when you call, and never seems to need help in return. They are the emotional anchors in their circles, yet inside, they're adrift. This kind of reliability is often born from fear. Fear of being a burden, fear of being forgotten. In psychology, this pattern is known as the fawn response, one of the body's ways of coping with emotional danger. Instead of fighting or fleeing, they appease, earning safety through service. Helping others becomes their way of feeling needed, which temporarily numbs the pain of feeling unseen. But the cost is high. They spend so much energy holding others together that they quietly come undone themselves. 4. The one who's always busy. Their schedule is full, their hands always moving, their phone never silent. At first glance, they seem productive, ambitious, thriving. But sometimes, busyness is a disguise for avoidance. When stillness feels threatening, motion becomes medicine. This is called behavioral distraction, a coping mechanism where activity replaces emotional processing. They stay in constant motion because quiet invites thoughts they're not ready to face. Restlessness becomes routine, exhaustion becomes identity. And when the world finally slows down, when the emails stop, the lights dim, and silence returns, the feelings they've been outrunning rise again, louder than before. 5. The helper who doesn't know how to receive help. They are generous souls, empathetic, attentive, the first to notice when someone's not okay. They listen deeply, comfort gently, and always seem strong. But behind that compassion often hides an old wound. Somewhere along the way, they learn that love is something you give, not something you deserve. They pour into others so they don't have to face their own emptiness. This imbalance creates a subtle loneliness, surrounded by people, yet rarely seen. Because while they are everyone's safe place, they have no safe place of their own. They deflect care with a smile or a joke, believing they don't need it. But the truth is, every healer bleeds somewhere too. 6. The perfectionist who fears falling apart. They live by rules, neat handwriting, spotless rooms, carefully chosen words. Everything in their world is measured, polished, controlled. But beneath that order is chaos. They're too afraid to face perfectionism psychologists say, is rarely about excellence, it's about control. A 2016 study in the Journal of Personality found that perfectionism is strongly correlated with anxiety, depression, and emotional suppression. These individuals learned that mistakes invite criticism, so they build a flawless image to feel safe. Yet perfection becomes its own cage. Every minor failure feels like exposure, every flaw like proof that they're unworthy. What others see as discipline is often desperation, an endless attempt to hold themselves together before anyone notices they're breaking. 7. The one who uses humor to hide hurt. They're funny, quick, and always make others laugh, but sometimes the jokes hide pain wrapped in humor. "I'm dead inside," they say with a grin, and everyone laughs, never realizing it's the most honest thing they've said all day. Psychologists call this self-defeating humor a way to mask vulnerability. A 2003 study by Martin and colleagues found it often links to higher depression and lower self-esteem. When the laughter fades, silence is all that's left. 8. The calm one who feels nothing at all. They rarely get angry, never cry, and seem unbothered by anything. People call them strong, peaceful, or emotionally mature. But what looks like calm is often numbness, the absence of feeling, not the mastery of it. This is known as emotional numbing, a response the brain develops after prolonged stress or trauma. When emotions become too painful to process, the mind shuts them down altogether. They don't feel joy, sorrow, or fear, just a muted version of everything. It's a survival instinct, not serenity. But numbing doesn't erase pain, it just buries it deeper. Over time, they forget how to feel, how to connect, how to live fully. And though the world praises their composure, inside they're quietly grieving the parts of themselves that went silent. 9. The sudden burst of positivity. Sometimes, after weeks of silence or withdrawal, a person suddenly becomes cheerful, talkative, even radiant. Friends think they've healed, but often this is the last flicker of emotional burnout. Psychologists call it a compensatory phase, when the mind, too tired to hold the pain any longer, swings to the opposite extreme. It's like gasping for air after being underwater too long, a desperate attempt to feel alive before the exhaustion floods back. This rush of "I'm fine now" isn't always recovery. Sometimes it's surrender, disguised as strength. When you look closely, these 9 signs aren't about deception, they're about defense. Pretending to be okay isn't weakness, it's a survival strategy, a mask built to protect us from pain. But over time, what once kept us safe begins to suffocate us. The real tragedy isn't that we hide, it's that no one ever told us it's safe to be seen. Psychologist Carl Rogers once said, "What is most personal is most universal." When we finally say, "I'm not okay," we stop being alone in our pain. So if you recognize yourself here, remember you're not broken for pretending. You are surviving. Healing doesn't start when you rip off the mask. It starts when you notice it's there. When you replace practiced smiles with small truths and allow yourself to feel without shame. Because the goal was never to look strong, it was to be real. And real, even when trembling, is where freedom begins. There's a strange thing that happens when you spend too long pretending to be okay. You begin to disappear, not all at once, but piece by piece. You stop sharing your thoughts, your laughter becomes quieter, your eyes less alive. You become a silhouette of yourself, perfectly functional on the outside, yet hollow within. Psychologists call this emotional dissonance, the painful gap between what you feel and what you show. The longer this gap lasts, the more invisible you become, not just to others, but to yourself. Research from the University of Texas found that chronic emotional suppression leads to higher stress hormone levels and decreased activity in the brain's social bonding circuits. In simple terms, pretending disconnects you from connection itself. You lose the ability to feel seen, to truly belong, because no one can connect with a version of you that isn't real. Over time, this invisibility turns into loneliness, the quiet kind that lingers even when surrounded by people. You start mistaking attention for intimacy, performance for peace. The body keeps functioning, the schedule stays full, but your inner world fades to grayscale. And yet the world keeps praising your composure, calling it strength. Unaware, it's slowly costing you your aliveness. That's the real price of pretending. You don't just lose others, you lose the bridge back to yourself. And when you can no longer feel your own truth, no amount of applause can fill that silence. Healing rarely begins with a grand revelation. It begins with something simple, almost invisible, a small act of honesty. Maybe it's the first time you answer, "How are you?" with something real. Maybe it's when you stop forcing a smile or admit, just to yourself, that you're not okay. These small moments of truth don't look heroic, but they are. They mark the moment when you stop abandoning yourself and start coming home. Psychologists call this emotional acceptance, the ability to experience emotions without judgment. A 2017 study from the University of California, Berkeley found that people who accept negative emotions rather than suppressing them experience greater long-term psychological health and resilience. The research is clear. Facing your feelings doesn't make them stronger. It makes you stronger. When you tell the truth, even a small one, your body relaxes, your breath deepens, your mind starts to trust you again. Healing isn't about fixing everything at once. It's about building a relationship with yourself, one moment of honesty at a time. You start to notice the small things. How your body tenses when you lie to protect others' comfort. How it softens when you speak from truth. You realize that peace doesn't come from pretending everything's fine. It comes from knowing you no longer have to pretend. Each act of honesty is like light through a crack. At first, it's small, uncomfortable, even blinding. But over time, that light grows. It fills the spaces where you used to hide, and one day, you'll notice you're not fighting yourself anymore. You're finally free to feel, to rest, and to live as someone who no longer needs the mask. Transformation doesn't happen in a single moment of clarity. It happens quietly, over time, as you begin to live differently, not perfectly, but truthfully. The shift from pretending to peace is not about becoming someone new. It's about returning to the person you were before the world taught you to hide. There's a calm that comes when you no longer have to manage two versions of yourself, the one you show and the one you suppress. That calm is not loud or euphoric. It feels like still water after a storm, honest, grounded, and alive. Psychologists describe this stage as integration, when the mind stops fighting against itself. A 2020 study in the Journal of Positive Psychology found that people who practice emotional authenticity, expressing feelings as they are, not as they should be, show higher life satisfaction, lower anxiety, and greater empathy. In other words, peace is not the absence of pain, but the harmony between your inner and outer worlds. When your emotions and your expression finally align, you don't need to perform strength anymore. You embody it. At first, peace feels unfamiliar. You may even miss the chaos, the old patterns of striving, fixing, and over-explaining. But as you sit in this honesty, you realize how much energy pretending had stolen from you. You start to feel the weight leaving your chest, the tension easing from your shoulders. Your relationships shift too. Some fade, but the ones that remain become real, built on truth instead of performance. And that's the quiet beauty of transformation. You no longer chase acceptance, you create it within yourself. You no longer fear being seen because you're finally seeing yourself. Pretending kept you safe once, but peace keeps you whole. It's not a constant happiness, it's a steady knowing that you can meet life as it is, without masks, without fear. You stop surviving your emotions and start living through them, not running, not hiding, simply being. That's not weakness, that's freedom. When you spend years pretending, you forget what real connection feels like. You learn to read the room, to say the right things, to make everyone comfortable except yourself. Healing begins to shift that. The more honest you become with yourself, the more you crave relationships that feel like truth, not performance. Reconnection doesn't start with other people. It starts with coming home to yourself. Only when you feel safe inside can you truly be seen outside. Psychologists call this authentic connection the bond that forms when two people meet without pretense. A 2021 study from the University of Mannheim found that authenticity, more than shared interests or attraction, is what sustains long-term emotional closeness. People don't fall in love with perfection. They fall in love with presence. When you stop editing yourself, you create space for others to do the same. Vulnerability becomes the bridge that connects two imperfect humans through truth. Reconnection also means forgiving yourself for the years you were in hiding. You did what you had to do to survive. You wore the mask because you didn't yet feel safe without it. Now, safety is no longer something you beg from others. It's something you build from within. You begin to speak gently to yourself, to offer the same understanding you once reserved for everyone else. And slowly, you start to notice the laughter feels easier, the silence less lonely, and your reflection a little more alive. True connection isn't about finding people who never leave. It's about finding people you no longer have to hide from, starting with yourself. When you return to that place of honesty, you realize you were never unworthy of love. You were just waiting to meet it without the mask. And that, perhaps, is the most beautiful kind of belonging, the one that begins inside and radiates outward. You don't have to be perfect to begin healing. Sometimes it just starts with telling the truth, even a small one. If this story feels like a mirror to your own, take a breath and remember, you're not alone, and you never were. The world needs your honesty more than your mask. If you found comfort or clarity here, share this video with someone who might need it too. Let's help each other stop pretending and start healing together.